The security footage didn't lie. Jae-sung Kang leaned forward in his leather chair, dark eyes fixed on the monitor in his private office. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. On screen, a slender figure in a simple grey uniform moved through the mansion's eastern corridor, not with the hurried steps of someone trying to escape, but with the deliberate caution of someone who didn't want to wake the sleeping household. The maid, Kennedy Davis. She'd worked at the Rothschild estate for 3 months, her background check coming back clean. Model employee, quiet, efficient, invisible, the way good staff should be. But Jae-sung hadn't survived a decade at the helm of one of New York's most powerful Korean crime families by trusting clean backgrounds and perfect behavior. Everyone had secrets. Everyone had angles. He watched her pause at the service entrance, glancing over her shoulder before slipping into the night. "Follow her," he said into his phone, not taking his eyes off the empty corridor she'd left behind. "I want to know exactly where she goes and what she's doing." What his man reported back 3 hours later changed everything. Kennedy Davis had learned long ago that rich people never noticed the hands that cleaned their toilets, pressed their clothes, or scrubbed the marble floors they walked across in $1,000 shoes. Invisibility was a survival skill she'd perfected over 6 years of domestic work, and it had served her well. Tonight, that invisibility was a necessity. She moved quickly through the pre-dawn darkness of Manhattan's Upper East Side, her worn sneakers silent against the pavement, the luxury gym bag slung over her shoulder, a forgotten cast-off from Mrs. Rothschild's closet purge, held her real uniform, scrubs borrowed from a nurse friend, a stethoscope, and a visitor badge she'd carefully altered. Mount Sinai Hospital's employee entrance welcomed her without question. Night shift workers barely glanced at each other, too exhausted to care. Kennedy knew the route by heart now. Elevator to the 4th floor, turn left past radiology, through the connecting hallway to the oncology wing. Room 4127. Brandon was asleep when she entered, his young face gaunt against the white pillows. At 19, her baby brother should have been worrying about finals and basketball practice, not stage 3 leukemia, and whether his sister could afford another round of treatment. "Hey, baby boy," she whispered, settling into the chair beside his bed. She wouldn't wake him. These stolen hours were just to be present, to hold his hand, to remind herself why she worked 3 jobs and survived on 4 hours of sleep. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rothschild's household manager. "Early breakfast meeting tomorrow. Need you in by 5:30 a.m. Kennedy closed her eyes, calculating. She could stay another hour, maybe 90 minutes if she skipped the train and splurged on an Uber. The rent was already 2 weeks late, but Brandon needed her more than her landlord did. "I've got you," she murmured, squeezing her brother's hand. "I promise, whatever it takes." She didn't know that 3 floors below, in the hospital's parking structure, Hyuk-jin Park sat in a black Mercedes, phone pressed to his ear. "She's visiting someone in oncology," he reported. "4th floor. Been here every night this week around the same time." On the other end of the line, Jae-sung Kang processed this information in silence. A maid working at one of his legitimate business holdings, the Rothschild estate, where he'd recently invested as a silent partner, with access to his operations, sneaking out every night to visit a hospital. "Find out who she's visiting," he ordered, "and Hyuk-jin, be discreet. I don't want her spooked yet." The answer came back within an hour. Brandon Davis, 19, leukemia patient. Sister listed as next of kin and sole responsible party. Outstanding medical bills totaling $847,000 and climbing. Insurance claim denied. Hospital threatening to transfer him to a public facility. Jae-sung stared at the report, something uncomfortable shifting in his chest. He'd ordered surveillance expecting to uncover theft, corporate espionage, or a connection to Wesley Volkov's organization. Instead, he'd found a woman sacrificing sleep and sanity to sit beside her dying brother. "Keep watching," he said finally. "I want to know everything." Kennedy made it back to the mansion by 5:15 a.m., slipping through the service entrance just as the kitchen staff began arriving. She changed quickly in the staff bathroom, splashing cold water on her face and pulling her natural coils into a neat bun. The exhaustion was a constant companion now, heavy in her bones, but she'd learned to move through it, to smile politely at Mrs. Rothschild's complaints about water spots on the silver, to scrub floors until they gleamed, to remain invisible and invaluable. "Kennedy, when you finish the upstairs bedrooms, Mr. Kang's office needs attention," the household manager announced during the morning briefing. "He'll be working from the estate today." Her stomach dropped. Jae-sung Kang, the silent partner, the man who appeared occasionally and made everyone nervous without saying a word. She had seen him exactly 3 times in 3 months, and each time his dark eyes had swept past her, as if she didn't exist, which was exactly how she preferred it. The universe, however, had other plans. She was dusting the bookshelves in his temporary office when he arrived, moving with the kind of controlled grace that came from absolute confidence in one's power. Kennedy immediately shifted into her well-practiced invisibility, eyes down, movements efficient but unobtrusive. "Leave it," his voice cut through the quiet, accented but clear. She froze, then turned, keeping her gaze respectfully lowered. "Sir?" "The dusting. Leave it and close the door on your way out." "Yes, sir." She moved toward the exit, grateful for the dismissal. "Actually," he said, stopping her at the threshold, "how long have you worked here, Miss Davis?" The use of her name made her heart skip. Rich people didn't learn the help's names unless something was wrong. 3 months, sir." "And you enjoy the work?" "I'm grateful for the opportunity, sir." The practiced response came automatically. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. For the first time, she raised her eyes to meet his fully, and found herself caught in a gaze that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed invisibility. Jae-sung saw the moment she looked at him, really looked at him. Her eyes were stunning, dark and deep, ringed with exhaustion but fierce with determination. In person, she was even more striking than the surveillance footage suggested. Smooth brown skin, graceful neck, proud bearing despite the humble uniform, and terrified. She was absolutely terrified, though she was hiding it well. "You're dismissed," he said, gentler than he'd intended. She fled. Jae-sung turned to the window, pulling out his phone. "Hyuk-jin, I need you to handle something quietly. Mount Sinai Hospital, patient Brandon Davis. I want his medical bills cleared. Anonymous donation. Make it look like a charitable foundation grant." "Boss?" Hyuk-jin's confusion was evident. "Just do it. And Hyuk-jin, I want updates on the sister. Every move." He didn't examine too closely why a maid's dedication to her dying brother had cracked something in the ice he'd built around his heart. He'd spent 15 years in his father's organization, the last 5 as its head, making decisions based on strategy and profit and survival. This wasn't strategic, this wasn't profitable. But watching her walk away, shoulders straight, despite the weight she carried, Jae-sung found himself wanting to do something he hadn't done in a very long time. Something good, simply because he could. The question was why her and why now? Kennedy made it to the staff bathroom before her hands started shaking. She'd felt his eyes on her, assessing, calculating. Men like Jae-sung Kang didn't notice maids unless they wanted something. And in her experience, powerful men wanting something from powerless women never ended well. She couldn't afford to lose this job. The pay was the best she'd found, and the hours allowed her to keep her second job at the diner and still make it to the hospital most nights. If she got fired, Brandon's already precarious situation would become impossible. Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital billing department. "Final notice. Payment arrangements must be made within 72 hours or patient will be transferred." 72 hours. 3 days to find nearly $1 million, or watch her brother die in a public hospital, where he'd be just another case number, where treatment would be about managing decline rather than fighting for survival. Kennedy looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, eyes bloodshot, skin dull from exhaustion, uniform immaculate because she couldn't afford for anyone to see her falling apart. "You've got this," she told herself, the lie familiar as a prayer. Just keep going. Just keep fighting. She had no way of knowing that in his office 3 floors above, Jae-sung Kang was making a call that would change both their lives forever, or that the man watching the mansion from across the street was reporting her every move to Wesley Volkov, who was very interested in finding weaknesses in the Kang organization's armor, and Kennedy Davis, exhausted maid with a dying brother, had just become the perfect pressure point. The hospital called Kennedy during her lunch break the next day. "Ms. Davis, this is Paige from Patient Accounts. I'm calling with some unexpected news about your brother's account." Kennedy's throat tightened. She stepped into the mansion's garden, out of earshot. "I know I'm behind, I'm working on it, I just need—" "No, Ms. Davis, you misunderstand. The balance has been cleared. All of it." The world tilted. "What?" "We received a substantial donation from the Hope Springs Medical Foundation this morning, specifically designated for your brother's care. The entire outstanding balance has been paid, and we've been authorized to continue his treatment protocol without interruption." Kennedy sat down hard on a stone bench, her legs giving out. That's impossible. That's over $800,000. I have the confirmation right here. The foundation specializes in helping families with catastrophic medical expenses. You must have applied at some point. I didn't. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I never applied to any foundation. After the call ended, Kennedy sat in the garden for 20 minutes trying to process what had happened. $800,000 didn't just appear from nowhere. Foundations didn't randomly select struggling families without applications, verification, publicity. Someone had done this. But who? And more importantly, why? The only answer that made sense was also the most terrifying. Someone knew about Brandon. Someone with the resources to clear that kind of debt with a phone call had been watching her closely enough to discover her biggest vulnerability. She thought about Jae-sung Kang's penetrating gaze the day before, the way he'd said her name like he knew exactly who she was. No, that was paranoid thinking. Men like him didn't notice women like her, and they certainly didn't throw away millions on random acts of charity, but the fear lingered, cold and certain in her gut. Jae-sung watched Kennedy through his office window as she sat in the garden, her body language screaming shock and confusion. Hyuk-jin had confirmed the donation had gone through, the hospital had called, and the brother's treatment would continue uninterrupted. He told himself it was a strategic move. A woman desperate to save her brother was vulnerable to exploitation. By removing that desperation, he was eliminating a potential weakness in his operation's security. Wesley Volkov had been probing the Rothschild estate's defenses for months, looking for entry points, and Kennedy's financial crisis made her an obvious target for recruitment or blackmail. This was protection, prevention, smart business. The rationalization felt hollow even to him. "Boss," Jian's voice came through his phone. "We have a problem. Volkov's people have been asking questions about the Rothschild staff, specifically about a maid." Ice slid through Jae-sung's veins. "Show me." The photos Jian sent showed two of Volkov's known associates watching the mansion, including shots of them following someone in a grey uniform. Kennedy. When were these taken? Yesterday and today. They haven't made contact yet, but it's clear they're building a profile. Jae-sung's jaw tightened. Volkov's organization specialized in finding pressure points, family members to threaten, debts to exploit, secrets to expose. If they'd discovered Kennedy's situation with her brother, they'd use it, offer to pay the bills in exchange for information, access, loyalty. And when she refused, because Jae-sung's instincts told him she would refuse, they'd threaten Brandon directly. The medical bills were paid now, removing that leverage. But Volkov didn't know that yet, which meant Kennedy was still in danger. "Increase security around the estate," he ordered. "I want eyes on the maid 24/7. If Volkov's people even look at her wrong, I want to know immediately." "Are you going to tell her?" Jae-sung considered. Telling Kennedy would mean revealing his surveillance, the payment, his involvement. It would destroy the careful distance he maintained between his legitimate business interests and his underground operations, but keeping her ignorant while danger circled closer felt unconscionable. "Not yet," he said finally, "but keep her safe." Kennedy noticed the car following her on her way to the hospital that night. 6 years of hypervigilance, of watching her back in rough neighborhoods and reading situations for danger, had taught her to trust her instincts. The black sedan had been behind her for 8 blocks, maintaining the same distance turning when she turned. She took a sudden right into a 24-hour bodega, watching through the window as the sedan passed slowly before parking half a block away. Her heart hammered. She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over 911, but what would she say? A car was driving on the same street as her. She had no proof, no evidence, nothing but the sick certainty that something was very wrong. She waited 10 minutes before exiting through the bodega's back door, cutting through an alley she'd used before when running late. The hospital was only 3 blocks away now. She didn't see the second car. "Miss Davis." The voice came from behind her as she reached the hospital's parking garage. "We'd like to have a word." Kennedy spun to find 2 men blocking her path, expensive suits, cold eyes, the kind of predatory confidence that came from knowing they were untouchable. "I don't know you," she said, proud that her voice stayed steady, "and I need to go." "Your brother's in room 4127, the taller one said. "Stage 3 leukemia, expensive treatment. Strange how that bill got paid so suddenly, isn't it?" Terror flooded her system. "Stay away from my brother. We're not here to hurt anyone, Ms. Davis. We're here to make your life easier. The people we work for are very generous with their friends, And we'd like to be your friends. I don't need friends. Everyone needs friends, especially people with sick family members. Hospitals can be dangerous places. So many ways for things to go wrong with treatment. Medication mix-ups, infections, accidents. The threat was crystal clear. Kennedy's mind raced, calculating distances, escape routes. The parking garage's security cameras were visible, but would guards respond fast enough? I don't know what you want, she said carefully, but I can't help you. You work at the Rothschild estate. You have access to places, information. We just need you to pay attention, remember things, simple. You want me to spy. The words tasted bitter. We want you to survive, Miss Davis. You and your brother both. Think about it. We'll be in touch. They walked away, leaving her shaking in the garage's fluorescent lights. Kennedy made it to Brandon's room running on pure adrenaline, her mind spinning. Someone had paid her brother's bills. Now someone else was threatening him if she didn't betray the estate. Were they connected? Was this all some elaborate trap? She didn't know who to trust, where to turn. Going to the police felt impossible. What proof did she have? And if these men were connected to anything serious, police involvement might make things worse. For the first time since their parents died 5 years ago, leaving her responsible for Brandon, Kennedy felt completely, desperately lost. She was still sitting frozen beside Brandon's bed when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're in danger. Meet me at the corner of Madison and 68th tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. JSK, Jae Sung Kang. So he was involved. He'd paid the bills, and now he wanted something too. Another powerful man with another agenda, ready to use her brother's life as leverage. Except the message hadn't demanded anything. It had warned her. Kennedy stared at the text. Exhaustion and fear and confusion warring in her chest. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. she'd get answers. She just hoped those answers wouldn't destroy what little remained of her carefully controlled life. Kennedy arrived at Madison and 68th at 1:55 p.m., scanning the crowded street for threats, escape routes, witnesses. The corner featured a small cafe with outdoor seating, public enough to feel safe, private enough for conversation. Jae Sung Kang sat at a corner table, wearing dark jeans and a black sweater instead of his usual impeccable suits. He looked younger, more human, though no less intimidating. A subtle bulge at his hip suggested he wasn't unarmed. Ms. Davis. He stood as she approached, pulling out a chair. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? She remained standing, chin lifted defiantly, despite the fear churning in her stomach. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise. You always have a choice. Please sit. I owe you an explanation. Kennedy sat slowly, keeping the table between them. You paid my brother's medical bills. Yes. Why? Because I could. He signaled a server, ordered 2 coffees without asking her preference. When she raised an eyebrow, he added, You've been drinking terrible breakroom coffee at the mansion for 3 months. You deserve better. The casual observation, proof he'd been paying attention to details most people never noticed, should have frightened her. Instead, it sparked something dangerously close to warmth. That's not an answer, she said. Jae Sung was quiet for a moment, studying her with that penetrating gaze. I had you followed. After I saw you leaving the estate at unusual hours, I needed to know if you posed a security risk. When I learned about your brother, about what you were doing every night, he paused. It impressed me. Your dedication, your sacrifice. So this was guilt? Pity? No. His voice carried absolute certainty. This was respect and strategy. I know who approached you last night in the parking garage. Kennedy's breath caught. You were watching. My people were watching. Those men work for Wesley Volkov, a very dangerous individual who wants to hurt me and everyone connected to my business interests. The Rothschild estate is one of those interests. I'm just a maid. You're a vulnerability. Your brother's illness made you a perfect target for exploitation. By removing their leverage, I protected both you and my operation. The coffee arrived. Kennedy wrapped her hands around the warm cup, processing. So you didn't do it to be kind. You did it to protect yourself. Does the motivation matter if the outcome is the same? Your brother gets treatment. You're free from that crushing debt. And in return you expect what? Loyalty, gratitude? Jae Sung leaned forward slightly. I expect you to understand that you're in danger, Ms. Davis. Volkov won't stop just because his first approach failed. He'll escalate. He'll threaten Brandon directly. He'll make your life a nightmare until you give him what he wants. Which is access to me. Information about my movements, my associates, my business dealings. You're not important to him. You're a tool to get to me. And he doesn't care if that tool breaks in the process. The blunt assessment stung, even though she'd already guessed as much. So what am I supposed to do? Quit? Run? Neither. Running would make you look guilty and put Brandon at risk. They'd find you anyway. He pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table to show her a photo of two men she didn't recognize. These are Volkov's primary enforcers. They'll approach you again, probably within the next few days. When they do, you're going to tell me everything they say and everything they ask for. You want me to be a double agent? Disbelief sharpened her voice. I want you to survive, and I want to protect the people who work for me, which includes you. His eyes held hers, dark and intense. I know you have no reason to trust me. I'm asking anyway. Kennedy wanted to throw the coffee in his face and walk away. Wanted to tell him she wasn't a pawn in whatever war he was fighting. Wanted to pretend she had the luxury of moral high ground and righteous indignation. But Brandon was alive because of this man. The crushing weight of impossible debt that had been suffocating her for months was gone because he'd made it disappear with a phone call, and the men who'd threatened her brother in a hospital parking garage were still out there. What exactly would I have to do? She asked quietly. Jae-sung's expression softened fractionally. Relief, perhaps, or approval. When they contact you again, listen to what they want. Agree if you must, but give them nothing of value. I'll provide you with information they can discover that won't actually compromise anything important. Ji-in will coordinate with you. Ji-in, one of my most trusted people, former NYPD detective. She'll be your primary contact. He pulled out a business card with only a phone number. That's her direct line. Call her any time, day or night. She'll keep you safe. Kennedy took the card, her fingers brushing his for a brief moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. Awareness, attraction, danger. She pulled back quickly. Why are you doing this? She met his eyes directly. And don't tell me it's just strategy. You could have handled this 100 different ways. You didn't have to pay Brandon's bills. You didn't have to meet me in person. You didn't have to risk exposing yourself to protect a maid you barely know. For a long moment, Jae-sung said nothing. Then, slowly, carefully, he spoke. My father built his organization on fear and brutality. He believed that power came from crushing anyone who stood in his way, including family. When I took over 5 years ago, I promised myself I would lead differently. With strategy, yes, with strength, absolutely, but not with the casual cruelty he employed. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. You spend every spare moment fighting for your brother's life. You work yourself to exhaustion without complaint. You remain kind and dignified despite circumstances that would break most people. That kind of strength, that kind of love, deserves protection, not exploitation. So yes, Ms. Davis, it's strategy, but it's also who I've chosen to be. The raw honesty in his voice hit Kennedy like a physical force. She'd expected calculation, manipulation, the smooth lies powerful men told to get what they wanted. Instead, she saw something genuine in his eyes. Respect, certainly, but also a kind of lonely recognition, as if he saw in her struggle a reflection of his own battles. I don't know anything about your business, she said finally. I can't help you with whatever this war with Volkov is about. You don't need to know anything. You just need to stay alive and keep Brandon safe. He pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. There's $10,000 in cash. Get a better apartment, one with security. Upgrade your phone. Take cabs instead of the subway at night. And if anything feels wrong, you call Gian immediately. Kennedy stared at the envelope, her throat tight. I can't take this. You already took $800,000 for Brandon's treatment. What's 10 more? His tone was gentle, almost teasing. Consider it hazard pay. I didn't ask for any of this. No one ever asks for the hand life deals them, Miss Davis, but we play it anyway as best we can. He stood, dropping cash on the table for the coffee. Jae-in will contact you tonight with the security protocols. Follow them exactly, and Kennedy, the use of her first name stopped her breath. You're stronger than you know, he said quietly, but strength doesn't mean you have to fight alone anymore. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the Manhattan crowd with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime moving through shadows. Kennedy sat at the cafe for another 30 minutes, the envelope heavy in her hands, her mind reeling. 24 hours ago she'd been drowning, alone, certain she was about to lose everything that mattered. Now she had a Korean Mafia boss as an unlikely protector, a pocket full of cash, and a target painted on her back by men who wouldn't hesitate to hurt her brother if it served their purposes. She should have been terrified, and she was. But underneath the fear, something else stirred, something warm and dangerous and utterly foolish. Hope, and maybe, just maybe, the first fragile threads of trust. Ji-in contacted Kennedy that evening, as promised. The meeting location was a Korean restaurant in Koreatown, discreet and warm, where conversations disappeared into the ambient noise of sizzling meat and animated chatter. The woman who approached Kennedy's table was striking, early 30s, sharp eyes, and the kind of controlled power that came from years of law enforcement training. She slid into the booth with fluid grace, her expression professional but not unkind. "Kennedy Davis, I'm Ji-in Chen. We're going to keep you alive." No preamble, no small talk. Kennedy appreciated the directness. "That's comforting." Ji-in's lips twitched in something that might have been a smile. "The boss said you had spine. Good. You're going to need it." She pulled out a sleek smartphone, still in its box. "New phone, encrypted. My number's already programmed, along with emergency contacts. Keep your old phone active. They'll expect you to use it, but anything sensitive goes through this one." Kennedy took the phone, running her thumb over the smooth surface. "This must cost more than I make in 3 months. Consider it an investment in asset protection." Ji-in's tone was matter-of-fact. "Now, security protocols. First, you're moving apartments. I've already found 3 options in buildings with decent security, all within your supposed budget so it won't raise suspicion. Pick one by tomorrow." "I can't just move." "My lease has a domestic violence clause that allows immediate termination. We'll forge the documentation if needed." Ji-in pulled out a tablet, showing photos of 3 apartments. All have controlled entry, security cameras, and are in neighborhoods where our people can maintain surveillance without standing out. Kennedy scrolled through the images, her head spinning. 48 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she had armed guards watching her apartment building. This is insane. This is survival. Ji-in's expression turned serious. "Volkov's people are going to contact you again. When they do, here's what you'll do. Agree to help them, but play reluctant. Make them work for your cooperation. It'll seem more authentic. And then? Then you give them exactly what we want them to have. The boss's schedule, modified, of course. Information about security protocols, outdated ones. Names of associates, people who don't actually exist or who are already compromised." Ji-in slid a folder across the table. "Study this. Memorize it. It needs to seem like information you're piecing together gradually, not intelligence you were handed." Kennedy opened the folder, scanning pages of detailed notes, schedules, org charts. "How am I supposed to remember all this?" "You're smart. You've been juggling 3 jobs and a dying brother for months without breaking. This is just another role to play." Ji-in's voice softened fractionally. "The boss has a lot of faith in you." The mention of Jae-sung sent an unwelcome flutter through Kennedy's chest. "He barely knows me. He knows enough. He doesn't extend his protection lightly." Ji-in studied her with those sharp detective's eyes. "Fair warning. Getting close to him is dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with Volkov. I'm not trying to get close to him. I'm trying to survive." "Good. Keep it that way." But Ji-in's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe Kennedy's protest, or that Kennedy didn't entirely believe it herself. Volkov's men contacted her 3 days later, as predicted. They approached her outside the diner, where she worked her second job, their presence turning her blood to ice despite expecting them. "Ms. Davis, had time to think about our offer?" Kennedy had rehearsed this moment with Ji-in a dozen times. She let fear show in her eyes. It wasn't hard to fake, and wrapped her arms around herself protectively. "I don't want any trouble." "Then help us avoid it. All we need is information. You see things, you hear things. Just remember them. I don't see or hear anything important. I'm just a maid. But you clean his office. You see who visits. You notice schedules, patterns." The taller man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Your brother's doing better. We here. Would be a shame if something interfered with his recovery." The threat against Brandon sent real rage surging through Kennedy's system. She channeled it into frightened compliance, exactly as Ji-in had coached. "What do you want to know?" "Good girl. Let's start simple. Who visits Mr. Kang at the estate? How often? What times?" Kennedy fed them the information from Ji-in's folder, making it seem reluctant, painful. False names, modified schedules, useless intelligence packaged as valuable secrets. They ate it up, pleased with themselves, convinced they'd broken her. You're doing great, Kennedy. We'll be in touch for more. And remember, this stays between us. You tell anyone, especially the cops, and your brother's treatment gets very complicated. They left her shaking in the diner's parking lot, and this time the fear was real. Because even though she'd played her part perfectly, even though she was supposedly protected, the reality of what she'd become hit her with crushing force. She was a spy, a double agent, playing a dangerous game with men who killed people for far less than betrayal. Kennedy pulled out the encrypted phone, texting Ji-in, "Contact Maid." They took the bait. The response came immediately. "Well done. Come to the safe house. Address attached." The safe house turned out to be a luxury condo in Tribeca, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. Nothing like the cramped studio Kennedy had imagined. Jae-sung was there. She hadn't expected him, and the sight of him standing by the windows, dark suit traded for jeans and a black button-down, sent her already racing heart into overdrive. "Miss Davis." He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Jian said you handled it perfectly. I lied to men who threatened my brother." "I wouldn't call that perfect." Kennedy's voice came out sharper than intended, stress and fear making her reckless. "You protected your brother. You protected yourself. That's what matters." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. I didn't sign up for anything. This just happened to me." "Yes, it did." Something in his voice made her look up, meeting those intense dark eyes. "And I'm sorry for that. If I could remove you from this situation without putting you in more danger, I would." The sincerity in his tone cracked something in Kennedy's carefully maintained composure. Exhaustion, fear, and the crushing weight of months of struggle came flooding through the dam she'd built. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being scared, of fighting, of not knowing if I'm doing the right thing." Jae-sung closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cradle her face with surprising gentleness. "You're doing everything right. You're surviving. You're protecting the person you love most. That's all that matters." Kennedy should have pulled away, should have remembered that this man was dangerous, that getting close to him was foolish, that she couldn't afford complications in a situation already spiraling beyond her control. Instead, she let herself lean into his touch, let his warmth and strength and surprising gentleness anchor her for just a moment. "I don't understand why you care," she said quietly. "I'm nobody, just a maid, who was in the wrong place at the wrong time." "You're not nobody." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the gesture achingly tender. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, and you deserve to be protected, not exploited." The words hung between them, charged with something that went far beyond strategy or obligation. Kennedy saw it in his eyes, genuine admiration, unexpected attraction, the dangerous beginning of something neither of them could afford. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "Terrible idea," he agreed. Neither of them moved away. Ji-in's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Boss, we have a problem." Jae-sung stepped back immediately, his expression shifting to cold professionalism. So fast, Kennedy almost wondered if she'd imagined the warmth of seconds before. Almost. "What is it?" "Volkov knows the information Kennedy gave them was false. He's escalating. We just intercepted chatter about a hospital raid." Kennedy's blood turned to ice. "Brandon." Jae-sung was already moving, phone to his ear, issuing rapid commands in Korean. He switched to English as he turned to Kennedy. "Hyuk-jin's pulling your brother from Mount Sinai now. We have a secure private facility upstate. He'll be transferred there tonight with round-the-clock security and the same treatment team. I need to see him. I need to make sure he's okay." "It's not safe." "I don't care," Kennedy's voice cracked. "He's my baby brother. He's going to wake up terrified in a strange place surrounded by strangers. I need to be there." Jae-sung studied her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "Fine. But we do this my way. Full security detail. You follow orders exactly, understood?" "Understood." As they prepared to leave, Ji-in caught Kennedy's arm, her expression grave. "Volkov's going to know you warned us. This just became exponentially more dangerous." "I don't care," Kennedy repeated, and she meant it. Brandon's safety was the only thing that mattered. Her own life, her own risks, those were secondary. She just hoped she'd live long enough to see her brother beat cancer. The private facility was a renovated estate 2 hours north of the city, hidden behind gates and guards, and enough security to protect a head of state. Brandon was already settled in a spacious room that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital when Kennedy arrived, Jae-sung beside her, and armed guards shadowing their every step. "Kennedy?" Brandon's weak voice cracked when he saw her. "What's happening? Where am I?" She rushed to his bedside, gathering him carefully into her arms. "Oh, you're safe, baby boy. That's all that matters. But the hospital said I was being transferred to a secure facility for VIP treatment. I don't understand. We can't afford this." Kennedy exchanged a glance with Jae-sung, who stood by the door, giving them space but ready to intervene if needed. They discussed this on the drive up. How much to tell Brandon, how to explain the unexplainable. "Someone helped us," she said carefully. "A really generous foundation covered your bills and arranged for this. It's all legitimate, I promise." Brandon wasn't stupid. At 19, battling cancer while his sister worked herself into the ground to keep him alive, he'd learned to read people and situations. His gaze slid past Kennedy to Jae-sung, assessment sharp despite his weakened state. "Who's he?" "My name is Jae-sung Kang," Jae-sung said, stepping forward with surprising gentleness. "Your sister works for one of my business properties. When I learned about your situation, I wanted to help. Nobody helps without wanting something in return." Jae-sung's lips quirked in what might have been respect. "You're right, but what I want is your sister's safety and peace of mind. That's easier to achieve when she's not terrified about your treatment." Brandon studied him for a long moment, then turned to Kennedy. "Are you in trouble?" "No," she lied, then reconsidered. Brandon deserved some version of truth. "I mean, not the kind you're thinking. Some dangerous people wanted to use you to get to Mr. Kang's business interests. This is just making sure you're protected." "So I'm bait." "You're my brother," Kennedy said fiercely. "And nobody is using you for anything. We're here, you're safe, and you're going to beat this disease. That's what matters." Brandon looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. "Okay. But Kennedy, promise me if things get too dangerous, you'll run. Don't sacrifice yourself for me." "Not happening," she said firmly. "We're in this together, just like always." After Brandon fell asleep, Kennedy stood by his window, staring out at the wooded grounds surrounding the facility. Jae-sung joined her, maintaining careful distance despite the awareness crackling between them. "He's strong," Jae-sung observed. "Like his sister." "He's scared." "Like his sister." Kennedy's voice was quiet. "How long can we stay hidden here?" "As long as necessary, but hiding isn't the permanent solution." He turned to face her fully. "Volkov needs to be dealt with." "Meaning what?" "Meaning I'm going to end this war. Permanently." The cold finality in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Kennedy felt something like relief. "Is that going to be dangerous for you?" "Everything I do is dangerous." He moved closer and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her want to lean in. "But I'm very good at surviving. I've noticed." She met his eyes, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "Thank you for all of this. I know you say it's strategy, but it feels like more than that." "It is more than that." The admission came quietly, almost reluctantly. "You've gotten under my skin, Kennedy Davis. You and your fierce love and your relentless dignity. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect you either. Didn't expect someone like you to care about someone like me." "Someone like you." He reached out, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "You mean someone brave and loyal and strong enough to face down men twice your size to protect your brother? Someone who works 3 jobs without complaint, who maintains grace under impossible pressure, who refuses to break even when life keeps trying to shatter her." His words painted a picture of herself Kennedy barely recognized. "That's not how I see myself." "Maybe you should." His hand lingered near her face, close enough to feel the warmth but not quite touching. "When this is over, when Volkov's dealt with and you're truly safe, I'd like to take you to dinner, not as your employer or protector, just as a man interested in getting to know a remarkable woman." Kennedy's heart stuttered. "That's a terrible idea. We've already established I have terrible ideas where you're concerned. Your world and mine don't mix. You're you, and you're not just anything." His voice turned fierce. "And I don't care about worlds mixing. I care about you." The declaration hung between them, weighted with promise and danger and a future that seemed impossible, yet increasingly inevitable. Before Kennedy could respond, Ji-in burst through the door, her expression urgent. "Boss, we have movement. Volkov's making his play. He's hit 3 of our operations simultaneously." Jae-sung's demeanor shifted instantly, the tender man replaced by the cold leader. "Casualties? Minimal. We were ready. But he's escalating fast." "Good. Let him." Jae-sung turned to Kennedy, his expression softening fractionally. "Stay here with Brandon, full security detail. No one gets in without my explicit authorization." "Where are you going?" "To end this." He took her hand, pressing something metal into her palm. A pendant, she realized. Delicate Korean characters on a silver chain. "This was my mother's. She told me it means protection and fierce love. Seemed fitting. I can't take this." "You can. And you will." He closed her fingers around it. "Keep it safe, I'll be back for it." The implication was clear, he'd be back for her. Before she could stop herself, Kennedy stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Be careful, please." Something blazed in his dark eyes. Surprise, pleasure, determination. "For you, I'll be invincible." Then he was gone, Ji-in at his heels, leaving Kennedy alone with the guards and her sleeping brother and a silver pendant warm in her palm. The next 36 hours were the longest of Kennedy's life. She stayed by Brandon's bedside, watching him sleep, holding his hand, trying not to think about Jae-sung walking into danger. News filtered through in fragments. A warehouse fire, arrests made, rival organization members turning themselves in. Ji-in called periodically with updates stripped of detail but heavy with implication. "It's almost over," she said on the second day. "The boss is finishing it." "Is he safe?" A pause. Then, gentler than usual, "He's the most dangerous man in New York right now. Volkov should be the one worried." When Jae-sung finally appeared in Brandon's doorway, Kennedy nearly collapsed with relief. He looked exhausted, a bruise darkening his jaw and dried blood on his knuckles, but he was alive and whole and looking at her with an intensity that stole her breath. "It's done," he said simply. "Volkov's organization is dismantled. You're safe. Brandon's safe. And you?" "I'm fine." He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms like he'd been starving for her touch. "I'm more than fine. I'm exactly where I need to be." Kennedy buried her face in his chest, breathing him in, smoke and sweat and that expensive cologne, alive and real and hers in a way that felt miraculous. "About that dinner," she whispered against his shirt. She felt his smile against her hair. "Yes, I think I'd like that. When Brandon's better. When things are calmer." "Kennedy, things are never calm in my world." He pulled back enough to look at her, his expression serious. "If you choose this, choose me. It won't be easy. There will always be danger. Always be complications. I've been handling danger and complications my whole life." She met his eyes squarely. "The difference is now I won't be handling them alone." "No," he agreed, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with aching tenderness. "You won't. Not ever again." From the bed, Brandon's voice interrupted, weak but amused. "If you two are done being dramatic, I'm awake and my cancer doesn't care about your romance novel moment." Kennedy laughed, the sound breaking through the tension like sunlight. "You're such a brat." "Yeah, but I'm your brat." Brandon grinned, then looked at Jae-sung. "Take care of my sister, or I don't care how scary you are. I'll find a way to make you regret it." Jae-sung's expression turned solemn. "You have my word. She'll never want for anything again, neither will you. I don't need your money." Brandon's voice turned serious. "I just need you to make her happy. She's spent 5 years sacrificing everything for me. She deserves someone who'll sacrifice for her." "I will." The vow was absolute. Every day for the rest of our lives. Kennedy looked between her brother and the impossible man who'd walked into her life like a storm, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or the beginning of it. The future was still uncertain, still complicated, but for the first time in years, it felt full of possibility instead of just survival. "So," she said, squeezing Jae-sung's hand, "about that dinner. Tomorrow," he promised. "Somewhere quiet where I can properly court you without worrying about rival mafia bosses or security protocols. And after," his smile turned wicked and warm, "after Kennedy Davis, the rest of our lives, however complicated and dangerous and absolutely perfect they turn out to be." She kissed him then, properly this time sealing the promise between them. Brandon made gagging noises from the bed, but neither of them cared. They'd earned this moment, earned each other, through fire and fear and fierce determination to protect what mattered most. And Kennedy Davis, former invisible maid turned unlikely mafia queen, had never felt more seen, more valued, more loved in her entire life. 6 months later, Brandon's cancer was in remission. Kennedy stood in the doorway of his new bedroom, part of the penthouse she now shared with Jae-sung, watching him trash-talk his friends over a video game, his laughter filling the space with life and energy. "He's doing well," Jae-sung said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. He's thriving. Kennedy leaned back against him, marveling at how natural this felt now. His touch, his presence, the security of knowing she wasn't facing the world alone. The doctors say if he stays clear another 6 months, they'll officially call it remission. He'll stay clear. The kid's got his sister's fighting spirit. Jae-sung pressed a kiss to her temple. Speaking of fighting spirits, Jean says you've been shadowing her operations. Kennedy turned in his arms, seeing the question in his eyes. Is that a problem? Depends. Are you interested in joining the business side of my operations? The legitimate business side, she clarified. I think I'd be good at corporate security. I've certainly learned enough about it lately. His smile turned proud. You'd be exceptional at it. Though I'll admit, I like the idea of you being officially part of my organization. Your organization? She raised an eyebrow. I thought we were partners now. We are. He kissed her, slow and deep. In every way that matters. Brandon's voice interrupted. You get a room. It's our apartment, Kennedy called back, laughing. Yeah, and I live here too, so keep the gross stuff to your own room. Jae-sung chuckled against Kennedy's lips. He's got a point. He's 19 and healthy enough to be obnoxious. I'll take it. Kennedy looked up at the man who'd transformed from terrifying stranger to unexpected savior to irreplaceable partner. Thank you for all of this, for giving us a life I never dreamed we could have. You gave yourself this life, Kennedy. You fought for it. I just made sure you didn't have to fight alone. His expression turned serious, tender. And I'll keep making sure of that every single day. Promise? Promise. You're mine to protect now, and I take care of what's mine. From the other room, Brandon shouted, Are you two being disgustingly romantic again? Yes, they answered in unison, then dissolved into laughter. Life wasn't perfect. Jae-sung's business still carried dangers, and Kennedy's transition into his world wasn't always smooth, but they were together. Brandon was healthy, and the future stretched ahead, bright with possibility. Kennedy Davis had started as an invisible maid, exhausted and desperate. She'd become a woman strong enough to stand beside the most dangerous man in New York as an equal, and she'd earned every moment of the happiness that came with it.